Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Let's Talk About It. And today is the very first monologue. I originally wanted this podcast to be a series of monologues, just sharing my experiences of things, things that I've learned along the way, what have you. But then it turned into a bit more of a dialogue of having interviews with people, which has actually been really incredible. And I am so happy that I made that decision last minute to do something like that. Um, Anyways, today, though, I am going to attempt the first monologue. And I wanted to talk about a few things that um, have always been things that I've expressed an interest in and have had an interest in, but recently have come back to um, learning about them, gaining an understanding about them, and like trying to put all the pieces together of what that looks like. So today I'm going to touch on my understanding of the ego, of unconscious guilt and fear, and how that shows up in our lives, and narratives, um, and what that looks like in society and for ourselves, belief systems that we have about the world we live in, as well as who we are. So yeah, I'm going to talk about all that stuff and my understanding of it, in the hopes that it will also help you as well on your journey. So as per usual, please like this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with others if you felt the message was powerful for you, that you felt that it could help others. The more that we have a community of people sharing the message of the podcast, the more people it will be able to resonate with. And I'm really grateful for your guys' support with all of that. So I have an interest in the history of religions, spirituality, just questioning the purpose of all of this. And it's definitely been something for, a very long time in my life that I've expressed an interest in. Like even when I was in university, I took only one course in the history of religion, and I found it to be quite fascinating. When I was younger, under 10, I actually used to go to the library and go get books on Stonehenge. And I actually used to write my own essays, self-guided essay writing on Stonehenge. I also used to be completely obsessed with Egypt. I wanted to be an Egyptologist when I was younger because I just had such a fascination with the culture and the religion, the spirituality of early Egyptians, as well as like Roman culture, all that type of stuff. It's always been a lifelong interest of mine. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of started to explore other types of ideologies, ways of life, yogic traditions, for example. Some basic understandings of Hinduism, just because of that association with yogic philosophy. My therapist is a Buddhist, so I do also I think that's why I resonate with him so much. And what we discuss is around, that Buddhist ideology, which I've spent a fair bit of time doing my best to read and understand about. A few years ago, I had actually come across, probably from Wayne Dyer, actually, A Course in Miracles. And I hadn't really spent too much time really paying attention to A Course in Miracles. I just knew, my impression of it was it's a very complicated book. Don't read it until you're ready. And it's only it's a book that, people who are more advanced spiritually, it's only for them, that they'll only be able to understand it. So for a number of years, I never even bothered to look up A Course in Miracles any more than reading books of people who had an understanding, or their own understanding, I suppose, which we could talk about that too, of A Course in Miracles. So it wasn't until I think it was 2019. I used to go to the bookstore all the time and just kind of walk around and browse and see what was available. And I stumbled upon A Course in Miracles, and I was like, oh, interesting. I'm just gonna buy this book today. Like this must be a sign. And I also come from a belief system that nothing is a coincidence and everything is a miracle if you choose to look at it that way. And side note on that, the way that I got to believing that or thinking that way is because I had nothing to lose, changing my thought processes and changing how I look at the world, because the world can be a pretty dark and depressing place. So it was one of those things that I needed to make a change for myself too, of like how I saw things. And I choose to see things from a perspective that it's all a miracle, that, nothing happens by chance. It actually brings me some comfort, knowing that, or having that approach to things. I know it's not the way everyone sees things, and that's okay. So came across this book. I've done the full year of the workbook. I've done my best to try to get through the readings, and I've read other books along the way that have kind of helped with my understanding of what the book actually has to say. This isn't about A Course in Miracles, by the way. It's just more that I've been reading a book about it, and so that's where the ego and the unconscious guilt and fear thing, that's the segue into like why we're going to talk about that right now. But where do I start with this? So the ego is basically the whole idea. We'll start with this part. Basically, the whole idea of A Course in Miracles is that everything that we see is an illusion, as in it's not real. So there's a little paragraph in the beginning of the book, and one part of it is that the opposite of love is fear, but what is all encompassing has no opposite. In the sense that what is the truth is reality, and what is not the truth, it doesn't exist. It's an illusion, and the illusion was what the ego created for us. Now, the ego in the idea of A Course in Miracles is slightly different than how we understand it from like Freud, or even Jungian psychology. Slightly different, although Jungian psychology, by the way, interestingly enough, has some type of association with its understanding of the Old and New Testament, which I don't know a whole lot about. I'm actually going to start reading into that a little bit more because I find that really interesting. But back to the ego thing, is that the ego is a thought process or a system of beliefs that we have all created ourselves, that have created this illusion of this world that we live in. And I think it's an interesting concept to grasp. Even the whole idea that, our physical bodies are an illusion, stuff like that, which I don't really fully understand all of that. So I'm not really going to speak to that specifically, but I do want to speak to the idea of the ego, the narrative, and unconscious guilt and fear. So the ego kind of keeps us stuck in this place of like non-enlightenment, if you will, pulling from yogic traditions, where the whole idea of your journey in life is to get to enlightenment, so that you can stop the cycle of reincarnation, that you've come to a place where you will reach the kingdom of heaven, if you will. I know I'm pulling from like a bunch of different types of religious systems here, or spiritual systems, that you reach samadhi, that you reach the kingdom of heaven, what have you, and that you don't have to come back into this birth rebirth cycle anymore, because you have actualized reality, which is a really fascinating concept when you think of it, and is at the core of many different religions and ideologies, which I also find to be really interesting. So the ego keeps us kind of stuck in the tape loop, if you will, stuck on the hamster wheel of being caught in this false reality, and the false reality is one of projection of our unconscious guilt. Is that not fascinating? So the ego keeps us stuck by the projection of our unconscious guilt, which then leads into fear. And this is the point that I want to make here, that I think, many of us live in a state of either cutting ourselves off, so not fully understanding why we feel the way we feel, why certain people piss us off, why certain experiences or circumstances make us angry or sad or reactive in any emotional way. And we're either cut off from that, or we're so involved in it that we can't even get out of our own way to take a step back and evaluate, well, what's the real problem here? And what I mean by that is I think that a lot of us get caught up on what seems to be the most obvious reason why we're mad about a situation, just as an example, when it's hardly ever that's the reason why you're upset. And it's an interesting standpoint to come from. And there was actually something that Gabrielle Bernstein, I believe her name is. I haven't read a whole lot of her books, to be honest with you. I know that she's written some wonderful things and has helped a lot of people. I just personally haven't really ever resonated with any of her messages, even though they are all based on her readings of A Course in Miracles. But there was one thing I will say that I actually thought was kind of cool, was that, as you're going through the day, just keep a small notebook or write it down on a note on your phone of like things that bothered you during the day, like triggers, things that piss you off, things that people did, things that just made you mad, or that you started to feel that, like for me, it's like I get like a chest tightness, like a panicky experience. And I get angry really easily. So that's another one too. Like if those are my personal triggers, just being aware of like what those bodily experiences are a good cue for you to figure out what your triggers are, what bothers you. What are those things that you want to vent about to your partner? Who do you want to bitch about at work? Like we all do it. But what I think is really fascinating is coming at those triggers, the things that bother us, from a perspective that all of it is a projection of our unconscious guilt, of things that within ourselves are unresolved, be that from childhood experiences, childhood trauma, if you will. Although I know that, not all of us identify with the word trauma. In things, it could just be, the belief systems that you as a little boy or girl had created for yourself of how the world worked, right? That we carry into adulthood. And so it's like identifying those, like some would even say like past life stuff that you brought into this lifetime, if you believe in past lives, all that type of stuff that, there's a reason why these things are triggering you, and it has nothing to do with the other person. And I know that's really difficult sometimes to conceptualize. And trust me, I am not perfect at this. There are definitely people in my life that it's like a tape loop for me, but it comes back and it's something that bothers me, of like, how dare they did something like that, or like, who do they think they are that they thought that way, or that they treated me that way, or like that person's such an idiot because they treated me that way. And so it's like I am aware that I do this, but I think it's like it's not enough just to stop at that and be like, oh, you're overreacting, like just stop thinking about it, just leave it alone, like move on, because that's being an ostrich with your head in the sand. It's not the way that you heal from and move on. You have to face those things. And one could say like that's a phoenix rising out of the ashes whole idea. And there's a lot of religious tradition, symbolism different types of ideology, symbolism, that talk about, your journey in life, and going through the pain and the tough moments, and just the stuff that you think is completely gonna tear you apart, but they don't. Um, and I mean, from a Christian perspective, I've been reading Joel Osteen lately too. From a Christian perspective, the whole idea that God doesn't give you things that you can't handle, that you will get through it, and that those tough times are an opportunity for you to learn. And I like that. I like that idea. And I think it helps make the idea of pain a lot easier to cope with, as seeing it as a tool to grow and to learn. And that's where the projections of the unconscious guilt that that we all have, um, can be pulled in there as like an opportunity for us to have a healing experience. And so I invite you to practice that during the day. And even back to the Gabrielle Bernstein thing, she was suggesting that you write down things that trigger you during the day, and then like devote a time like in the evening or whenever you do have a moment to like go through them and be like, yeah, that actually did bother me. Why did that bother me? And kind of like keep asking yourself the why of like, why did that bother me? Like, why was that person cutting me off in traffic? Why was that so triggering to me? Why did I get so mad? Like, why did I have road rage after that? Yeah, just because the real reason isn't the most obvious one, uh, unless you're more trained in starting to understand a little bit deeper about how like it's not the superficial one, if you will. There's always something a little bit deeper there. And you may notice themes as well when you're evaluating this stuff. And so those are those themes of unconscious guilt, or those inner fears that you have, and choosing to work through them and challenge them, and open yourself up to the idea that it's okay to see things differently. So on that note too, I want to end this little chat with the idea of narratives as well. And I think narratives can be ones that we create for ourselves, like inner belief systems of who we are. I'm a good person. I'm a bad person. I don't deserve certain things. What have you, right? Those are all narratives. And they're belief systems that we've created from a way to try to, cope with something in our lives, that somehow bring us some type of false comfort. But I will assure you that working through those things will, at the end of the day, bring you more comfort than the comfort of, sitting on a pile of your own guilt and insecurities, is to actually work through them. And narratives can also be seen in society, in the world. I mean, there are narratives on many different things. And I think too, just even seeing the narrative of the world at the moment, I mean, we can all say that this is a very interesting experience we are all going through. Mind you, there have been many interesting experiences throughout history, and this is really nothing new when you think about it. I saw something the other day. I was at the pharmacy, and I'm not going to say it completely correctly, but it was the whole idea that in order for us all to get along and to play in the sandbox together, we have to understand that not everyone's going to have the same narrative as us. They're not going to have the same belief system as us. But having acceptance over that is where we can all learn to live in harmony together. And I know that there's a lot of like, yeah, buts in that. I don't think there has to be, but I do think the human condition and the ego likes to but question and doubt a lot of these different things. And I think like just going back to that, the idea of like narratives that are out there and how we take our unconscious guilt, project them onto others, judge people for the narratives that they have, people judge us for the narratives that we have. And it really has nothing to do with the narrative at the end of the day, right? We're all going back to the whole thing that, you know, all of this is, well, for one concept, is an illusion. I don't know how to describe it another way without it sounding odd, because to me, I still think that, you know, that whole idea that all of this is an illusion is a little too abstract for me to understand right now, or for me to get on board with, I suppose. But I think this is a great opportunity in time for us to challenge our own narratives. It's a great opportunity for us to see, to identify our triggers even more, right? Because of the state of the things that are going on. And I really truly believe that in order for us to save humanity and to save others, to be of service to others, to uplift the world in a loving way, is to start with challenging our own inner things, our own unconscious guilt, our own projections that we put out into the world, because it starts with us, right? If we're not being in the highest state of vibration, of energetic frequency as we possibly can be, then, you know, other people subconsciously pick up on that, or it just doesn't help others around you grow. And so I think it's the whole idea, the Ram Dass saying that, you know, at the end of the day, we are all just walking each other home. And it's, you owe it to others, and you owe it to yourself to work on this stuff, and continue to challenge yourself to work on this stuff. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. But please never forget about it, because it's so important and it's so vital. Like, in order for you to live in a way that brings you complete joy and happiness, and for you to help others along their journey as well. And I think the act of, challenging your unconscious projections, or your unconscious guilt, the projections that you put out into the world, even towards yourself, because those are projections too, those judgments you have about yourself. But then also practicing forgiveness. And the forgiveness one, I'm not going to speak to a whole heck of a lot, because I'm still trying to understand what forgiveness looks like without like just putting a Band-Aid on it. You know, like forgiveness isn't just slapping a Band-Aid on it and walking away from it. That's not true healing. Forgiveness is actually like truly forgiving. And I mean, in a Buddhist ideology, it would also mean forgetting. Maybe I'll talk about that on another monologue time. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that you found it insightful. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this whole concept of the ego and narratives and unconscious guilt and fear, projections, and the whole concept of forgiveness, which, like I said, hopefully someday I'll talk about a little bit more when I feel a little bit more confident in my understanding of how exactly that works. Not as simple as saying, I forgive you, working on it. But yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. And like, as always, like, please share this with anyone who you feel like could resonate with the message. Take care, guys.